I want to talk to you about how to kill background noise during podcasts. I mean, the thing is that podcasting is already hard, right? You got to really have the inspiration. You got to have the right equipment, and if you don't have the right sort of locality or like location, then background noise can actually really destroy your podcast. So to this conversation, I want to really give you a few hacks and tips to really sort of address that. So the thing is that when you think about podcasting, you have to really think about the environment. You have to think about the what I call the inflow and outflow of information and also data. Okay, and when you think about the outflow of data, you have to think about the background noise. So when recording a podcast at home, background noise like passing traffic can be a big problem, or you can have a child actually crying in the background, right? That's before actually this can be a problem. But when you think about the possibilities in terms of fixing it, you are going to actually find things a lot easier, especially when you actually start from the start. In other words, when you think about actually podcasting, you have to integrate into the your vision from the get-go. Actually, the possibility that you might have actually a background noise, and you also need to think about how to mitigate that background noise. Now, there is something called dynamic microphone. So you want to choose a dynamic microphone in non-studio podcasting. And the cool thing is that dynamic microphones tend to pick up a narrower range of sounds, both frequency and amplitude. And those are important elements. Frequency and amplitude are kind of quite essential when it comes to having a very good quality sound, okay? And so when I speak about frequency and amplitude, this means what? It means that basically a dynamic mic can actually pick up fewer sounds from far away and less of the annoying non-voice frequency audio. And a dynamic microphone like the ever popular Samsung Q2U has actually a heart-shaped pickup pattern. And that means what? It means that it will be much more responsive to you in front of the mic as opposed to anything going on behind it. And that's kind of cool because that gives you more control of the sound quality. It gives you control also of the equipment in addition to your voice. Okay. The great thing about the Q2U, among others, by the way, there are other dynamic microphones, but I'm just giving you an example to show you how great those dynamic microphones are in general. So the great thing about the Q2U is that it really works as both a USB and XLR mic. That's what you want to have. You want to have this sort of duality in terms of USB and XLR mic. This means what? It means that you can plug it into your computer and start recording right away with the option to upgrade to a mixer or interface further down the line. So that helps a lot in terms of scalability. If you can afford to pay a bit more, then the Shure MV7 is another USB XLR mic, which is actually marketed as offering perfect recordings for imperfect rooms. So that's really fantastic. Now, let me talk to you about sound treatment and podcast background noise. The thing is that when you are a podcaster, and it doesn't matter whether you are a neophyte podcaster or an experienced podcaster, sound treatment is going to be quite essential for you all the time, especially when you are if you integrate sound treatment in your LX strategy, LX your listener experience. Okay, most sound treatment options on the market are actually designed to combat echo and reverb as opposed to blocking out the sound of a phone ringing. With that said, the more absorption you can get between your mic and the source of any noise, the better. So this is one of those things where if you are trying to absorb let's say absorb space between your mic and the source of any noise, the better. But you have to really think about, you have to choose the location of your podcast pretty smartly as well. Okay, and if you want to really absorb, you want to think about sound blankets, and sound blankets can actually be a great way of building an extra layer of protection into your recordings. And so because acoustic treatment actually has a limit in certain cases, and this is one case where acoustic treatment is not going to be as effective as it would be in other scenarios, because acoustic treatment will not kill podcast background noise, but it can really help. Okay, it's one of those things where you have to see what works, and you have to see also how to fix things, how to fix this background issue, let's say on a consistent basis. In other words, when you actually start your podcast career, whether you have 5 listeners or 50 listeners, you have to really think of yourself as a podcaster with 5 million listeners or 500,000 listeners. So the kind of experience you actually can give to five listeners is the same experience that you are going to try to give to your 5 million hypothetical listeners, because that really forces you to bring up your quality, the quality of your audio to a certain level right off the bat. And it's not really complicated. It's not really costly too. It just demands some kind of preparation to know exactly what works and what doesn't work. Okay, especially when it comes to combating echo and reverb, and you want to do this on a consistent basis. One thing you want to do when it comes to killing background noise when recording a podcast is to actually get close and cozy with your mic. Okay, basically the thing is that you have to really use your voice as an instrument, and you have to use your mic as actually the conduit through which you can really express yourself. You can speak your mind literally. Okay, if you are close, then you are also loud. That means what? That means you are much louder than the surrounding sounds, so you drown them out effectively. Now, I'm not asking you to actually scream into the mic. I'm not speaking. I'm not saying that you have to actually speak loud also into the mic. You just have to find the right balance in terms of being comfortable. You have to be comfortable in the podcasting session that you are actually initiating, but you have to be comfortable also in terms of initiating a conversation with a listener. Because the whole thing, you see, the thing is, this whole conversation about killing background noise and killing reverb and fighting echo, all those things are pretty interesting. But if you forget about your listener experience, if you sacrifice your listener experience, all these efforts are for nuts. You're just wasting your time, because in the end, if the listener has a crappy experience, they're not coming back to listen to a further episode of your podcast, right? So you want to solidify your relationship with your listener. Very important. So if you are close, then you're also loud. That's really great. If you are quiet, you'll have to boost your voice up in the production and editing phase. With that comes the background noise. Okay, so what you want to do is, as you are actually recording a podcast, you want to get close, record loud, and make sure you are creating a big volume gap between you and that traffic. And it doesn't have to be outside traffic. It could be stuff also happening in your house. And as I said a little earlier, it can be a baby. It can be anything. It can be the neighbors. It can be anything. Okay. So if you want to set your levels for recording a podcast, we actually have an entire show focused on that. And so you can really have a clear idea about your mic technique. Okay. And so when you actually you want to watch those 2 videos, because they will help you record actually the best possible source material, and that will go a long way in helping you eliminate podcast background noise, especially in the long and medium term. Now, if you are trying to kill background noise when recording a podcast, you can also actually create a mock studio. So, but a mock studio actually requires you to actually go all out. You want to really be dedicated here. And the thing is that many podcasters think that to create a studio, they need to annex an entire room. You don't need to do that. The family and pets are sent back into the kitchen, while the living room is converted into a recording space big enough to record the next live aid effort in. That's not really true. The thing is that you don't really need to turn an entire room into a studio. You only need to build a localized recording space around you and your mic. That's what you need, really, because see, your listeners don't care about the space you're in. This is not a podcast is not a video experience. It is an audio experience. So your listeners don't care if you are actually doing like you're recording a podcast while you're sitting in a very tiny space. Okay. So the thing is that when I speak about building a localized recording space around you and your mic, you can actually do this with everyday household items such as duvet, drapes, or towels. Okay. It doesn't need to look amazing. if you are working purely in audio, it just needs to be practical and comfortable. And that comfort and that practicality will be reflected in your listener experience. Okay. So you, of course, you need to have a setup that's pleasant to use. That's for sure. Being too warm or too cramped won't lead to a very enthusiastic content. So this is one of those things where if you are comfortable, your listeners will feel it. Okay, will feel that comfort. If you're happy, your listeners will feel that happiness. If you are sort of inspired, your listeners will feel that inspiration. So that's why I really want you to really focus first and foremost on your own experience, because of course I've said a little earlier that you have to focus on Alex. That's true. When you are a podcaster, you have to think about your listener experience. But you as a podcaster, you have to also be comfortable. So the PX is kind of critical too. The podcaster experience also must be great. Otherwise, everything actually becomes pretty bad from there. So when you think about killing background noise when recording a podcast, you might actually think about extra protection also, because extra protection, I mean, sometimes the primary protection conduit can be good enough, but sometimes it's not good enough. I mean, it depends on how you set things up. It depends on your locality. It depends on your experience also. Okay, so when I speak about extra protection against podcast background noise, this is essentially recreating some of the effects you get with double glazing. It takes a bit more effort and practice and rehearsing, if you will, like a repeat over and over and over. But if you are struggling with excessive background noise, it can be really worth it. For some, the best solution is actually taking your mic and your recorder and head to your wardrobe. This is kind of similar to the duvet, but might be a little more sustainable. So getting in amongst all your hanging clothes can have a significant effect on your recordings. They'll dampen out tons of the background noise and create a nice silent bed for your voice, really. Okay. Now, having said that, not everybody has this sort of comfort or this sort of capability here when I speak about going to your wardrobe. Because I mean, what if you don't even have a wardrobe, right? Well, the thing is that you got to ask yourself, how can you create a similar experience as that of a wardrobe? Does that mean you have to go to the bathroom? Oh yeah, I'm not kidding. I mean, you have podcasters who actually record their podcast through like they record it from the bathroom. Of course, that means that you got to be a little comfortable, right? If you're sitting on your divine, I mean, quote unquote, on your throne, and you're not comfortable actually recording, again, going back to what I said, your listeners will feel that you are not comfortable, so you're just messing up their listening experience. But the thing is that for you to get extra protection against podcast background noise, you have to do whatever is needed to make sure you get that sort of top quality audio for your listeners. One thing you might also want to think also is that you have to think about the scalability. So if you adopt one strategy, make sure you can replicate this strategy over and over and over, because if you do it once and it works out fine, but you can't really replicate it, this could be a little problematic. One thing you can also do is that you can plug the gaps, okay? And so double glazing, actually, I mentioned double glazing before, and double glazing does have a big effect on background noise within a house or even an apartment, by the way. You can have this within an apartment also. But if you don't have that, you can at least keep out some of the noise by fitting the rubber or a foam, for that matter, foam seals to windows and doors. So this will help you kill background noise when recording a podcast. And it will also help control the airflow into your house and keep a bit of the noise out with it. You never know, it might even help with your energy bills too. I mean, it's one of those things where you can actually do several things with one process, right? It's all about being efficient here, because if you want to be a very successful podcaster, you have to really master the back office in terms of cost, in terms of efficiency as well. And so when you think about podcast background noise tips, what if everything else fails? What can you really do this year? Well, what if you have done everything you possibly could to keep background noise out of your podcast, yet you can still hear the sounds of, let's say, passing cars, aircon units, and the neighbor's TV? I mean, those things are really those things are happening. I mean, it's one of those things where you have to really account for it as well. Okay. Now the question is, do your listeners really care? I mean, that's a big question to really think about. In terms of whether or not your listeners care, the most important thing is going back to what I said about Alex, your listener experience. Okay. So whether your listeners care or don't care, if you as a podcaster think like if you care a lot about Alex, then you have to really care enough about the sound quality. One thing for sure, you'll be really surprised at how many podcast listeners don't even notice, let alone mind, right? Most consumers listen using cheap earbuds, or even they listen in busy environments, that's for sure, such as buses or trains. So if they ever do happen to notice the odd bit of background noise in your podcast, they are unlikely to take offense at it. Fans of your show will know that you don't have access to a top of the range studio and are doing your best with your own resources. Above anything else, they will appreciate the content you are putting out. That's why they are listening after all. Having said that, you have to make sure that the content is top quality. If you have background noise, you've tried everything, but you still have background noise, but the content itself is quality, the research is solid, and you are inspired, those things will actually mitigate the background noise, the effect of the background noise. It will not eliminate it, but will really dampen it a little, a little more. If you want to kill background noise when recording a podcast, you can actually try some music. I mean, music actually doesn't mean that you have to actually pay for music, though. You can have copyright free music, that's for sure. So if you are a perfectionist, though, why not try adding some gentle background noise to segments of your show? Music can actually help mask background noise, and it can really adding that extra layer of professionalism too. So this is kind of cool, but make sure that you find copyright free music, or you can pay for stuff. You can pay for podcast music that's really safe and legal to use, because the legality is really critical here. Because if you are going to use somebody else's music, make sure that you have actually like you are complying with the rules. You can also use noise reduction software. Okay, so if the background noise in your podcast is more constant than intermittent, that is the steady drone of traffic, it might actually be possible to use a process called noise reduction, so and to strip most of it out. Okay, and the cool thing is that you can access noise reduction in editing software such as Audacity. You can also go with Alitu. You can go with Adobe Audition. You can also, so you have a lot of players. Okay, and what happens here is that you are able to have software to automatically remove or at least reduce substantially noise. That's kind of cool. Okay, and this happens through the volume leveling, processing, and publishing processes. So that's kind of cool, especially when it comes to giving at least your listeners that nice crisp voice in the end. And you can even record your podcast with the right software, either solo shows or online calls. So you can actually combine the whole thing with an affordable dynamic mic and some cheap sound treatment to kind of help you actually win the war against the background noise in the first place. And if you can do that, then you have a pretty good podcast setup this year to actually make sure that you are at least offering something pleasant to your listeners, and that's what you should actually aim for. So here's a recap here. In today's conversation, I spoke to you about how to kill background noise when recording a podcast, and I actually walked you through a series of tips and hacks to kind of help you really deliver a high sound quality this year. Thank you so much. God bless you. I'll see you next time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.